Zion Foster was last seen on January 4th of 2022 at her home in Eastpointe, Michigan. She reportedly left her home with her cousin Jaylin Brazier and has not been seen since. Some of the theories reported by Foster's family was that sex trafficking could be a reason for the 17-year-old's disappearance. It is reported that Jaylin and Foster were smoking marijuana together that night of January 4th of 2022. Jaylin, who is 24 years old, claims that his cousin stopped breathing for an unknown reason while they were smoking. He said that he panicked and decided to put her body into a dumpster because she wasn't breathing. Officials say that Brazier put the 17-year-old in the trunk of his car and drove her body to a landfill. When Detroit resident Jaylin Brazier turned himself in on January 19th, he did so alongside his lawyer. He admitted he had been lying to police, and 3 days later, he was officially arrested on a warrant connected to his cousin's disappearance. Officials charged him with lying to a police officer in a violent crime investigation and lying to a peace officer. He was arraigned on January 24th of 2022. On March 30th of 2022, Brazier was sentenced to 23 months to 4 years in prison for lying during the investigation of Foster's appearance. But in January of 2023, he was released. 2 months later, a search for Foster's body began on May 31st at Pine Tree Acres landfill in Lenox Township. The massive search was planned for a 100 by 100 foot area. Local crews used heavy machinery to remove about 20 feet of material to search the landfill for Foster's body. Originally, officials said that the search could last as long as 7 to 8 weeks. At the beginning of August, crews dug between 25 to 28 feet. Authorities believe that Foster's body could be buried at least 75 to 100 feet beneath the surface of the landfill. Police say that they searched through 3,500 truckloads of trash. The landfill search concluded on October 12th of 2022. On Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, Wayne County Prosecutor Kym Worthy charged Jaylin Brazier with 1 count of first-degree murder of his cousin, Zion Foster. The following video content will be portions of the trial for Jaylin Brazier in the murder of his cousin, Zion Foster.
Also look for dates.
Sergeant Jones, I want to ask you about another topic that's different from what you testified about last week. In connection with your role in this case, did you have any involvement in efforts to find the possible location of Zion Foster's body?
Yes.
And in terms of that overall effort, who was sort of the point person on that effort?
I was.
Okay. And can you walk us through sort of like the steps that were taken, starting with the very first step after obtaining that statement from the defendant on January 19th, 2022?
Yes. So once the location of the dumpster was identified, the members had taken Mr. Brazier out. From there, I reached out to Waste Management.
And what is Waste Management?
That's the garbage trucks are run by Waste Management. It's a company, they own landfills, the garbage trucks and several dumpsters.
Okay. And by, I guess, January 19th, was there any suspicion of where her body might have been at that point?
Yes.
And where was that?
It was believed at that point that the dumpster, we know she was not in there at that time, so it would have made it out to a landfill.
Okay. And so what was your sort of purpose of reaching out to Waste Management initially?
Yeah, so reaching out to Waste Management, when we give them the address and the date of the location, they have everything logged and tracked. So they're able to tell me what days the trash are picked up at that business. And then they can look at the log on the next date that it was to be picked up, which was that following day after we had interviewed. The following day after the incident, that morning, that dumpster was already picked up. From there, they tell you what truck number was assigned to pick up the trash from that address. And then it'll tell you a minute-by-minute route where that truck went and then where it ended up, where it went to the transfer station located in Detroit.
And I want to show you what has been admitted as People's Exhibit 88. And in particular, page 1 of that exhibit. Are you familiar with the video that is sort of underlying the screenshot that's depicted here?
Yes,
And did you have an opportunity back in the early stages of the investigation to review that video?
yes,
And based on your review of that video, did you identify anything of significance in terms of the investigation?
yes. So when I reached out to Waste Management, they are able to identify a truck number that would have been assigned to those addresses. That truck number was 211727. That's the same number that appeared on this truck as it picked up, so we knew that we were watching the correct truck and that the information that Waste Management had given us also matched with the video.
Okay, and obviously the screenshot here is a little bit blurry, but if you were reviewing this video on your desktop, would you be able to see that number?
Yes,
Okay, and you saw the number 211727?
yes.
And once you obtained that information about this specific truck number, where does the investigation take you from there?
So from here, once we identified the truck that had picked up the contents from that dumpster, that truck then went to 1550 Harper, which is what's called a transfer station for Waste Management.
Okay, and if I go to page 2 of the exhibit, in exhibit 88, what does that show us?
Yep, that's going to be the same truck. You can see the numbers. It's circled up at the top, the 211727. And they gave us a approximate arrival time when that vehicle made it to there. So that's when we were able to know at what time would we start reviewing video at the transfer station.
Okay, and then once you have this information about the truck's possible arrival time at the transfer station, where does the investigation take you from there?
So this truck then pulls into what they have is like a bay area. So the trucks pull in and they dump out the contents into this large bay. And then there's other, I don't know the exact words or equipment, but there's other machines that then pick up that trash and they place it into like a tractor trailer bed. So when that truck comes out there and it backs up, it dumps its contents there, and then you continue to watch the video to see when those contents get loaded and placed into the semi. So behind this building is where the semi truck will pull up, and there's only one that's back there, and it will load the contents into there. And then as you're watching that truck pull off, we're able to ID it as truck 4975.
Okay, and if I go to the final slide of this exhibit, is there any significance, I guess, to that particular truck that's depicted there?
Yes, that's going to be the truck that had the contents that was dumped from the original truck and placed in 4975.
Okay, and so once you have all this information now, the possible landing spot of the contents of the original garbage truck are in this truck, where does the investigation take you from there?
Yes, so from there, I was in contact with Waste Management Security and Tracking System. They were able to locate this truck. All the trucks from this company are GPS, and there's a tracker, so it gives me the exact route where this truck pulls off and leaves and ultimately ends up dumping out the contents.
Okay, and were you able to, working with Waste Management and the information that they had, were you able to trace that truck to a specific location?
Yes,
And where was that location?
yes, so that was in Lenox, Michigan at 26 Mile, close to Gratiot. It's called Pine Tree Acres.
And what is Pine Tree Acres?
Pine Tree Acres is a landfill.
Okay. And I want to show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit 84. Can I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
What does proposed exhibit 84 show?
This is going to be the map from showing the tracking points from Waste Management. And it's gonna show all the red dots, which is gonna be the route of travel where the truck comes in and then it comes around and goes up onto the roads. And then this is going to be the last point where it stops when it's at the landfill and where the contents would have been emptied onto the ground.
Okay, now based on that sort of information, did you develop a particular area of interest in the landfill?
Yes.
Walk us through how are you able to zero in on a particular area of interest in the landfill?
So the area that's marked on this map, there's four green dots, and that's gonna tell you the whole cell of where all the trash is going at that landfill. When we track the truck to the last stop where the red dot is, and we know that the tracker is on the front of the truck, so you do the measurements on where the debris would have hit the land. We had to learn and talk to several other people out there and watch which way was the trash once it was emptied, which way was it being pushed, and how were they filling up that section. So from where the truck stopped, that area, they were pushing trash north, which would have been this way, up here. So we identified an area where we were gonna work from the final spot that we knew the contents had emptied and landed on the ground. And we went, our goal was 100 feet north and 100 feet wide.
Okay, and so how big was the particular area that you zeroed in on for a possible search?
Our search area was down to a 100 by 100.
Okay, and is that area depicted on that overhead map that you have that's marked as proposed exhibit 84?
So this is gonna be the entire cell. So this cell is like, I don't have the exact numbers to the inches, but this was like 400 feet by 375 by 300 and something by 200. So the area that we picked was where we believed our highest probability of success would be by looking to see which way the trash was placed and which direction that things were pushed, and how much trash had already been filled into that cell and how many tons of trash, and then measuring the feet from there, how far we would have to go out and down.
Okay, and so the area that was ultimately searched, is that area depicted within the overall cell?
Yes,
And that exhibit overall, does that fairly and accurately depict the area of the landfill search in this case?
yes.
With that, I move to admit proposed exhibit 84.
No objection.
May I publish, Your Honor? Okay, and if we're just looking at this overall area here, what is visible in this overall view?
That's the majority of the entire landfill.
Okay, and then what do the four green dots toward the middle portion of the picture depict?
Those four coordinates would depict the cell, which was being filled at that time.
Okay, and so the area that was ultimately searched, it would be within that specific area, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And was there ultimately a search conducted in that area?
Yes.
And can you walk through sort of the logistics of what are the sort of logistical measures that had to go into place to conduct the search?
Yeah, so there were several logistics to setting up and coordinating for the landfill search. Number one being equipment. We needed to utilize heavy equipment that we were gonna be able to get into that area and to start removing debris. So excavators, backhoes, the dump trucks, other extra garbage trucks to bring down, as well as doing the maintenance on those vehicles while we're out there. We also had to take into account any hazards that we might come across and have the proper safety equipment for everybody. All the way down to, we had, the steel to put into the bottom of the shoes, so there was no punctures. The safety masks, gloves, hazmat suits. We had to prepare and have the fire department and medic there every day that we were on that hill. In case there was an incident or an injury, they were also there when we came down to help decontaminate. And you came down and you would get basically sprayed down in case there was any biohazards on you.
And what sort of hazards might one encounter out there?
So we encountered a lot of propane tanks, asbestos. There's a lot of different chemicals that, this is your everyday trash. It's not separated. It's not recycled items. This is everyday trash. There's human waste. There was animal carcasses. We found a lot of food products that had been recalled that might have been like dumped in mass dumps. So pretty much anything you can think of, it was out there.
And what was you mentioned excavators and other digging equipment. What's the purpose of having that type of digging equipment and actually digging out there?
Yeah, so the trash is compacted. I mean, when it gets out there, it's gone through several compactions in the original truck along with in the semi that it's placed in, and then once it is on the ground, you have those machines that are obviously compacting and trying to get as much room as they can at their land.
Okay, and I guess in terms of the digging that needed to be done, was there any significance to the amount of time that had passed?
Yes.
And help us understand that. How does kind of time factor into this?
So time factored in for us, we were a couple weeks behind already. The day that we were able to identify which dumpster, and there was landfills, there was two originally before we were able to narrow down the trucks. Those landfills had stopped placing any additional things on there, but we already had over 2 weeks worth of debris. So the original estimation of the depth that we would have to go, we had to have the heavy equipment go in there first to remove the top 20 feet of garbage that was out there before we even got within 5 feet of our potential search area. So we left like a 5-6 foot buffer. We pull off the first top 20 feet, and then from there, as we pulled it, that's when we started manually searching each load.
And how long did this search go on for?
We started at the very end of May, and we continued 7 days until October.
And what did a typical day look like? Starting with who would be on site in a typical day partaking in a search?
Yeah, so the typical day would start at 7 a.m. We would prepare with doing a count of how many members we were going to have, how many different search decks we could use, whether it was going to be 1 or 2. At 7 o'clock, everybody would get suited up. We had to have vans and different vehicles that we could easily clean out after to transport, because you're transporting somebody up there. They're not dirty yet, but as you're bringing them down, we're now covered in different chemicals, debris, or hazards. So we would try to get up top by 8 o'clock. We would continue to search from 8 until about 11:30. There would be a break. Everybody would be brought down, deconned. Everybody would sit down and have their food. And then after an hour, we had to resuit back up. We went back up top. This continued again till about 4 or 5 o'clock. On days where weather was permitting, we had a third shift that would stay over. And when they came, the other shift that came down, the third shift would stay up top. So there were days where we would search until there was, it was not safe because of either the lighting or weather conditions. When we come down, we can't just leave the property, so we always had two members at least on the properties, making it secure so nobody was going in and tampering with anything or going into the landfill after hours.
And approximately, on a daily basis, what would the typical crew be composed of that would be out there searching?
So when we started, it comprised of, we had about 50 people out there that were ready to go and search. And then this is also, we had the hazmat team, so different members that were down at the bottom waiting in case something happened. As it continued and goes on, you know, the numbers slowly started dropping. Where we would have like maybe 20, 25 searchers a day. But anytime, every day we searched, but as it continued on, we slowly started losing members, and that was because of different events or manpower just not being as accessible as it was in the beginning.
And the members of the search team, where did they come from? Were they Detroit police officers? Were they other individuals?
Yeah, we had multiple agencies that a lot of people wanted to come out and help. So we had different counties, Wayne County came out and helped, Macomb County's Sheriff's Department, they had members that came out and helped. We had Lapeer County came out, different members from the Michigan State Police, the Detroit Police. Anytime we had even just one or two members that came from an outside agency, I believe there was one in like White Lake, Michigan, they wanted to come. They would come out and volunteer their time through their department to assist us with that search.
And were these people that were required to be there, or were they volunteers?
Everybody was volunteers.
And in terms of when searchers were out there on a daily basis, what was the sort of method that was used to sift through everything that was out there?
So we had made, when I say a deck, it's not like you walk out on your deck. It's basically, we made the area flat and a different section of the landfill. The dump trucks that we have would go in, we would have an excavator that would take debris from our search area and it would place it into that dump truck. The truck would then come over and bring it to our search deck and try to, as best that they can, spread it a little bit so we could search it. Once that truck pulled off, then we went in with metal rakes, the hard metal rakes, and we started breaking open any bags and anything until it got to where we knew that nothing there contained any remains that we were searching for. Then the front end loader would have to come around and push all that debris into our search pile, so we knew that that was done, and then that process just continued. We would have like 3 or 4 trucks running at one time unless there was some type of a mechanical problem, which we ran into a lot with the, you know, tires, or the trucks were overheating. So mainly we would have 2 or 3 trucks continuing to run. So as one deck was laid out and everybody searched it, while they were clearing that, we then transitioned to the next deck and we would start working on that.
And during this time that the search was going on, was this something that was kept secret, or was there public awareness about the search?
It was a public awareness.
Were there any media reports, to your knowledge, about
Multiple.
the ongoing search?
Yes.
Now, you described the search area as roughly 100 feet by 100 feet, is that correct?
Yes.
During the course of the search, was the team able to search the entirety of that area?
No.
And help us understand, what were those sort of limitations that were at play there?
So as you're searching, when we started to get into different depths, you're looking for items to help identify when did this get there. So we would look for different mail. We would try to, obviously, we had a list, and it had every address that we knew that truck had picked up from. So if anybody came across something from Little Caesar's Pizza or anything with that zip code, we also looked for dates. So we knew that this had happened in January. If we were finding anything well after our search date, which was January 5th when that truck went, then if we were looking at January 19th dates, we knew that we still had to go to a deeper depth to try to get to our thing. So what originally was believed to be 25 feet, at some points in there, we were all the way down at 50 feet.
And at some point, did the search conclude?
Yes.
And was Zion found out there?
No.
The throughout your experience, have you ever worked on anything like this before, like a landfill search?
I've gone and helped maybe for a day or two, something like how other members would come in and help us. But this was my first taking and putting everything together, coordinating all the manpower, and giving up my family for those 5 months.
In your experience and understanding of landfill searches, are they often successful?
No.
And why was it that the Detroit Police Department decided to search this particular landfill?
We were going to try. We were going to go out there and put forth. We had with the truck and the video and the different things, being able to kind of pin it down. We were going to go out there and we were definitely going to try to be able to make it to where the family could bring her home.
If hypothetically, if you had the information that you obtained on January 19th, on January 5th, could that have potentially made a difference?
Objection, that's speculation.
Yes, 100%, because you're not dealing with the massive amounts of offloading and removing of those layers. So you're given a more centered area. So even just being out there every day and watching how much trash was coming in every day and how they were kind of pushing it and how far they would go, and then they would tarp it off. So if it was the following morning, we would have already known that that tarped off area is going to be where we were at. By the time we got out there, they were already pretty much done with that cell. So when I notified them to not add anything, it was irrelevant already because they had already moved on to a whole other area in the landfill. So obviously every day that we lost was weeks of trash that we had to search through.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning.
Now, exactly when did you reach out to Waste Management? What day?
I believe it was the same day that Mr. Brazier came down, the 19th.
The 19th? Okay. And you indicated that you told them that to basically stop the operations in that particular area?
Yes, I told 2 different landfills at that time to stop dumping on those areas.
Okay. But it wasn't until May until you actually started searching that particular landfill?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a particular reason why it took multiple months in order for you to start searching that particular landfill?
Well, we couldn't search day one because you got to do, as you can see, a lot of research. You're watching the video. You're trying to narrow down what trucks were used. Watch the video of those items being put in the truck. You're watching the video of the tracking of the vehicle going out there. We had several days where we had to go out there to get an understanding. I've never worked in a landfill, so you have to learn that process. You also have to order all this different equipment and get all the heavy machinery. It's not something that I can just go tomorrow and get for such a massive search.
Okay, fair
If it
enough.
was something smaller, it might have happened a lot faster, but with such a task, it's not something that can happen overnight.
Okay, absolutely. And you stated that it was or was not your first time working on a landfill.
It was my first time organizing a landfill.
Organizing, okay, but you had worked on a landfill previously,
I
correct?
had gone out on once or twice and helped look for.
Okay. So it was your job to, I guess, order the equipment that might be necessary to search a particular landfill, correct?
No. My job was to compile a list of everything that I was going to need. We have members that work in our ordering department, and we have members that work with the heavy machinery, so I'm giving a list of everything that I want, that I need to be successful to go out there and search a landfill safely.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's what I asked. So it was your job to gather, to organize the equipment that would be necessary to search this landfill, just to be clear, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you instruct the volunteers or individuals who were assisting you in this particular search?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you felt that the information that was provided to you was in fact credible in order for you to be searching this particular area, correct? From Mr. Brazier, to be clear.
With the video and with the statement and everything matched up, yes.
Okay. And had you thought he was being deceptive as far as what had happened, surely you wouldn't have been in that particular landfill for 5, 6 odd months, correct?
Well, we went there because of the evidence led us there as well. So if I didn't have evidence to give me an area of where to search, then I wouldn't just do a random search.
Okay. And this information was provided to you January 18th, 19th, that ballpark figure, as far as what had happened to Miss Foster's body?
Yes.
Okay. And you stated that at some point in time you concluded the investigation in that particular landfill, correct?
Our chief shut us down, yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
No.
Any questions from the jury? We try to order natural tendency for non-verbal answers such as shrugging the shoulder, nods of the head, as well as because those don't translate into the record. There's an objection. Please stop talking until it's resolved. Please keep your voice up, and if you would, please state your name and spell.
Catherine Gilliman, CATHERINE, GUILLAUMIN.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you tell the jury what you do for a living?
I'm a detective in the Detroit Police Department.
And how long have you been employed with the Detroit Police Department overall?
Over 15 years.
And how long have you been in your current role with the Detroit Police
About 4 years.
And what is your current role with the Detroit Police Department?
A detective in the homicide unit.
And as part of your role as a detective with the homicide unit, were you involved with the investigation into the disappearance of Zion Foster?
I was.
And what was the scope of your involvement in connection with that investigation?
I was the officer in charge.
And what does it mean to be the officer in charge of a particular investigation?
So essentially when we do a homicide investigation, it's a group effort. There's several investigators. I'm the one that pretty much is given all the information that's been gathered and organized and go forward with charges.
Okay. And prior to the investigation in this case, have you worked on other homicide investigations?
I have.
Is there anything in particular about this case that you would say is like a distinguishing feature compared to other homicide cases you worked
Yes.
on prior to this?
Yes.
And what would be that distinguishing feature?
There's no body.
Okay. And during the course of the investigation, did you probe or look into the possibility that Zion was still alive?
Yes.
And what sort of steps did you take to investigate whether she was still alive?
I contacted morgues, hospitals.
And in terms of contacting morgues and hospitals, did you find any information relevant to the investigation?
No.
Did you look into international travel records?
I did.
And how do you go about doing that?
I contacted, I don't remember the agent's name, but it was someone through the FBI.
Okay, and were you able to find any sort of useful information suggesting Zion had traveled abroad?
No.
Did you look into getting records from Zion's social media accounts?
I did.
And what sort of accounts were you able to get records from?
Instagram, TikTok, I believe that was it.
And in terms of obtaining those records, what's the process that you have to go through to obtain records from social media accounts?
So myself or someone on the team will draft a search warrant. So a search warrant, you type all your probable cause and you will submit it to the company. The company will, it's signed by a judge, the company will then in some type of portal or email, but they'll give you a return and that'll have all the information for the account.
Okay, and I'm holding what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 63. It's a certified copy of certain Instagram records, and I would just move for that to be admitted under Michigan Rule of Evidence 902 subsection 11.
No objection.
All right, so then
Thank you.
this is 63.
63, Your Honor, correct. I'm just going to publish that exhibit briefly. If we look at the documents in exhibit 63, do you see on page 1 there's a name here? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my I forgot to plug it in. I'm sorry. Okay, page 1. There's a particular name here.
Yes.
Is there any significance with respect to that name?
That was the Instagram handle, if you will, provided by Sierra Milton.
Okay, and so that's when you requested records, are you requesting records for that particular name?
Yes.
Okay. If we go to page 17, let's start with page 13. Do you see the photo depicted on page 13?
Yes.
Do you see the date under that photo?
Yes.
And what's that date say there?
December 14th, 2021.
Okay. And so that would be how long approximately before Zion's disappearance?
Of close proximity.
Okay. And same if we go to page 17. Do you see the date under that photo on page 18?
It's the same date, December 14th, 2021.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to review sort of the entirety of these records that were obtained?
I did.
And did you see any evidence of Instagram activity attributable to Zion after January 5th of 2022?
Not Zion.
Okay. You heard Vertez Gonzalez testify about using her account
Correct.
at some point. Was there evidence associated with that in these records?
Yes.
And would that just be limited to January 5th of
Correct.
2022?
Correct.
Okay. Did you also obtain information about Zion's bank account from her mother? And did you do any sort of search warrant to obtain bank account records?
I did. I authored 2 search warrants, one in the beginning of the investigation and then one, I believe it was about 6 months in, to see if there was any banking, any type of transactions.
Okay. And did you obtain records back on those search warrants?
I did.
And what was the purpose of looking to see if there was any record of transactions in those records?
If there was any transactions coming from Zion.
Okay. And holding what's been marked as proposed exhibits 64 and 65, which are certified copies of banking records, and I would move for both of those to be admitted again under 902 subsection 11.
No objection.
All right, which in particular 64 and 65 are these different banks?
They're records that were drawn at that were produced at different times. So I can give you a.
So the same bank, just 2 different.
Same bank account, 2 different search warrant returns.
Okay.
Is that description correct?
Correct,
Is that
yes.
good? And did you look, in terms of the first set of records that you obtained, did you notice anything when you reviewed those records?
That the activity stopped on January 4th of 2022.
Okay, and then when you obtained the this second set of records, did you see any new activity after January 4th, 2022?
I did. I don't recall the exact date, but it had been some time later. I thought that was of significance. So also on the account for the particular bank account, Sierra Melton, Zion's mom, was on that account. So I reached out to her and she confirmed that she had made, I believe it was a deposit into that account.
Okay, and how many transactions, I guess, was that after January 4th, 2020?
Just one.
Just one, okay. And you looked into that, and
Correct.
Was there any sense that that could show that Zion was still alive based on your findings?
No.
Okay. Did you look into obtaining records from Google accounts associated with the defendant?
I did.
And I want to publish what's been already admitted as Exhibit 18. Looking at this document, are you familiar with this particular document?
I am.
And where did this document come from, if you will?
This was generated from the Google return, which is given to us when we do a search warrant, and this is what information we get back from the company.
Okay, and if we go down to page 8, do you see the bottom two rows there? Starting with the one on the bottom, what does that indicate?
The one where your cursor is?
Yes.
It's a search for our trash truck also, our trash trucks also compactors.
Okay. And we've already heard testimony about this particular search and the timing of that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. If we go up to page 7, what is the search reflected there toward the middle of page 7?
How do the police track your phone?
And what's the date associated with that search?
January 7th, 2022.
Okay. And how about the next search above that? What's the search reflected there?
How do the police track missing people's phones?
And what's the date reflected for that search?
January 7th, 2022.
Okay, and we go up to page 3. What's the search reflected here?
Can the police take my phone without a warrant?
And what's the date reflected for that search?
January 7th, 2022.
Now, during the course of the investigation, as the officer in charge, did any information come to you about an eyewitness in this case?
No.
Okay, so was any eyewitness ever identified?
No.
Other than the video that's been admitted in court, has any other relevant video been identified to you as the officer in charge of this case?
No.
Are you aware of any other relevant video?
No.
There was some testimony about the searches of the defendant's residence back in January of 2022. When those searches were conducted, starting with the first one on January 16th, were you involved in the case at that point on January 16th,
No.
2022? Okay. And when is it that you became specifically involved in the case?
I believe it was the 18th is when I was told I was gonna be the OIC.
Okay. And throughout your role as the officer in charge, have you familiarized yourself with both the photos from that original search and the evidence that was recovered from that
Yes.
search? And other than what was presented in court, was there anything that you're aware of that was relevant that was recovered during that search?
No.
There were some photos of some devices at the residence. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Were all the devices in this case attempted to be forensically analyzed in some way?
Yes.
And other than what we've seen presented in court from any sort of forensic extraction of phones or other devices, is there anything else that you're aware of that would be material to the case?
No.
Okay. There was some discussion about laboratory analysis that was done in this case.
Yes.
And in particular, some discussion about a toothbrush attributable to Zion Foster.
Yes.
What was the purpose of submitting that toothbrush to the lab again?
So because this is kind of a different case, we would typically, when you have a body, you would receive blood drawn at the morgue. Since we don't have a body, we had to use a different reference sample, such as a toothbrush, to get DNA.
Okay, and so in a typical case, the morgue blood would then be the sort of reference sample for the victim?
Yes.
Okay, and we didn't have that here, obviously.
Correct.
There was some testimony about, I guess, certain things being submitted or not submitted from the search of the defendant's vehicle. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And were you involved in sort of the process of determining which items were to be submitted to the lab versus which items would not be submitted to the lab?
I had a part in it. I believe the first lab report was authored by a trooper who was also involved in the case. We were all briefed of the case of what was going on. The indication from the dog was that there was a hit on either side of the trunk and nothing really focused in the middle. And then later, while we still had all the evidence from the trunk, speaking with Zion's mother, that none of the items looked familiar to belong to Zion.
Okay, and so is that what you just mentioned? Does that inform sort of why certain things were submitted and certain things were not submitted?
Correct. The liner was a big indication of where the dog indicated on, so we sent that off to be the most prominent.
Okay, and you mentioned the first lab. I think you said lab report, but do you mean lab submission?
Correct. Lab
Okay.
submission.
And so what is a lab submission? Can you help us understand, I guess, what that is?
So it's a form that our department utilizes, and it's sent to the Michigan State Police Lab. So we have a list of other officers have talked about Tracker. It's our evidence system. So all of our evidence is in one system. We put evidence in, it's down in our property section, and then we also take it out, and we will submit this form, and we will give a brief synopsis of what we're looking for, what occurred, and what we're trying to find with the evidence provided.
Okay, and you mentioned there was a trooper involved in the initial laboratory submission, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you say trooper, what do you mean by that?
Michigan State Police Trooper Stephanie Chang,
Okay, and
who
is
was a
there
part of Homicide Task Force.
and is there a reason behind having a Michigan State Police trooper handle a laboratory submission?
I won't say it goes faster, but they are familiar with the process. They are familiar with, some of them are, I can't recall if Trooper Chang was an evidence certified to do evidence recoveries, but the process seems to go faster
Okay.
because they're familiar.
And in terms of the lab, when you make a laboratory submission, does the Detroit Police Department have its own sort of forensic crime laboratory?
No.
And who administers the forensic crime laboratory in the state of Michigan?
Who?
Which agency is responsible for the crime
Michigan
laboratory?
State Police.
Okay. other than the phone that was admitted as Exhibit 85 from Zion, were any other devices ever located from Zion Foster?
No.
And I want to ask you about a couple of items that have been admitted into evidence already. You heard some testimony from Detective Markle and Detective Franti about a specific phone that was extracted after the defendant's arrest. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in terms of the overall extraction for that phone, did you have an opportunity to review that yourself?
I did.
And did you familiarize yourself with some of the content on that phone?
I did.
I want to show you first what's been marked as Exhibit 74. Are you familiar with what this report depicts?
Yes.
And in terms of the row number 1, there's a particular file name. What is that file name?
Ebony Banks .mp4.
Now, in the phone extraction, did you familiarize yourself with that particular file?
I did.
And what is that? What type of file is that? Is that a video, a document?
It's a video.
And did you watch the video?
I did.
And could you just describe briefly what that video depicts?
In the entirety, it appears to be a rape type video.
Objection, this is speculation, her opinion of a video that's obviously on the internet, and she's characterizing what her opinion of it is, right? I think that's highly inappropriate.
Okay. Mr. Elsey?
I mean, I think
She
we went
just
over this.
offered, she said she's viewed it and she's offering her opinion about what it is. She saw it in person. Over.
Okay. And just to be clear, we're going to talk about 2 videos, correct? And I'm going to lead a bit here just because I want to avoid an objection. Do these videos depict actors?
Correct.
They're not like real videos depicting real violence, is that correct? But this first video entitled Ebony Banks, what does that video depict in terms of the actors doing?
So I could tell there was like takes in one part of the video. They're almost pretending to be driving, and you can clearly see in the window there's no movement. It is a posed as a younger black female in a short skirt, appears to be walking. A black male approaches her in the car and offers her a ride. He the dialogue is they know each other. They know each other from family, friends, from the neighborhood. She agrees somewhat hesitantly, and she gets in the car, and like I said, it was to appear that they were driving, although they were parked, so I could tell this was some acting. They're sitting in the car as if they're driving. He's supposed to be driving her home. An argument ensues. He takes her head. She's sitting in the passenger seat. He's in the driver's seat. He takes her head and bashes her head onto the passenger door on the inside, and she appears to pass out. It's cut away at some point. He then, the next scene that you see, he has her over his shoulder, and we're in some type of room with backlighting. It's just a bed. She's knocked out. She appears to be knocked out. He puts her on the bed. In the meantime, he's manifesting. Appears that she's not awake. He's manifesting and saying something to the effect of, you know, I'll teach you a lesson,
Is there,
something to that effect.
is there sexual activity at that point?
It appears that he, while she's unconscious, sexual intercourse is happening and she is unawake. She's not awake. At some point, she does wake up and she's trying to tell him to stop. And again, actors, she's, you know, saying no and putting her hand away from him, but it appears that it's not as incredibly forceful as.
And how about the second video on Exhibit 74? Did you review that video as well?
Unfortunately, yes.
And just briefly and relevant part, what does that video depict?
Same type of video. This is a white female and two white males. There is a female white actor in the beginning, and they're all calling her mom. The brothers, the posed brothers, are some type of stepbrother. She's the stepsister. They refuse to let her leave, and again, depict rape style intercourse, and call her a slut, a tramp, some things to those effects, and then the mom, the supposed mom, comes home, and you know, she's clearly crying, and they're holding her down to say, don't say anything.
And I want to ask you also about something that's been submitted as Exhibit 86. Again, for these two files that are depicted here, what types of files are these? Are these documents or are these films?
Documents.
And did you have an opportunity to review these particular documents on the overall phone extraction?
I did.
And again, just if you could briefly summarize, what do those documents depict?
These appeared to be Asian comic books. The first one was titled, the Untitled 12 PDF was titled Rape of, I assume, some character.
Objection, this is speculation. I mean, there's no evidence that this particular Untitled 12 depicts what she's saying. It sounds like she's speculating as to what the title is, because obviously she doesn't remember it.
Judge, again, we went over this in pretrial motions. We're not going to show the actual comic books for obvious reasons, but I believe that her testimony is describing what she viewed when she actually reviewed these.
Sustained. Or excuse me, overruled.
And again, you said these are two comic books, is that correct?
Correct.
Is there a theme to these comic books?
Yes.
And what is that theme?
Rape.
Okay. And are these pornographic in nature?
Yes.
There was some testimony from Katrina Smith, if you recall,
Yes.
and at some point were you asked to subpoena her as a witness for this trial?
I was.
Were you able to subpoena her?
No.
What sort of efforts did you make to try to subpoena her?
Went to her house several times, phone calls, text messages, left my business card on her vehicle as well as my partner's to reach out.
Okay. At some point, was she detained on something called a witness detainer?
She was.
Okay. And was she released pretty much immediately on that after being detained?
Yes.
And since then, has she been cooperative?
Yes.
Okay. There was some discussion about her previous testimony. Had she testified previously at a hearing before?
Yes.
And what hearing was that?
At the exam, preliminary exam in August of 2023.
Okay. And did she appear willingly under a subpoena at the point of that exam?
Yes.
There was some testimony about some sort of CPS claim being made, and I believe she made the allegation that, or the defense raised the issue that she was blackmailed into testifying. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Was there any sort of CPS complaint made with respect to Ms. Smith?
There was.
And who made that complaint?
I did.
And when did you make that complaint?
I believe it was July 7th of 2023.
And why did you make that complaint?
When I was reviewing jail calls, as one typically does to a defendant, I overheard a phone call that was, I believe, June 23rd of 2023. There was a conversation between Katrina Smith and Jaylin Brazier, and you can hear kids in the background. The defendant is telling her to tell them to be quiet and then to pop them. There's a conversation of her yelling at the kids. Then you hear, hold on. Then you hear what appears to be loud thumping or smacking noises, and then the children screaming, or child screaming.
And when you come into possession of information of that nature, can you just sit on that?
No.
Do you have any sort of obligations to make a report at that point?
Yes.
And is that why you made a report?
Yes.
Did you make a report to try to blackmail her or coerce her into testifying in this
No.
case? Did that report have anything to do with her testimony in this case?
No.
And did anything come of that report that you're aware of?
No.
Okay. So she was never charged. She was never, obviously her kids are still with her, correct?
Correct.
Were you involved in the landfill search that was described by Sergeant Jones and forensic technician Felicia Jackson?
It was.
And what was your sort of involvement in that search?
Similar to what Sergeant Jones had explained for the day-to-day. We would get there, suit up, be briefed, suit up, and then be transported to the top of the hill. Just like she explained, digging in the hole, putting it in the trash truck, bringing it over, dumping, sifting through with metal rakes, break for lunch, get decontaminated, and then start again for the afternoon shift. I also, because it was under a search warrant, someone had to be there at all times, so I stayed until the overnight security could make it to the location.
Okay, and was the area secured during the time of the search?
Yes.
I want to ask, specific to one of the charges in this case concerning tampering with evidence, what's the when a murder case is initiated, what's the first hearing at which evidence is presented?
An exam.
Okay, and if there is a murder victim, would there typically be some evidence at an exam about the cause and manner of that individual's death?
Yes.
And would that typically be in the form of a medical examiner's report?
Correct.
When it comes to the charge of murder, do you have some familiarity with that charge through other cases that you've worked on?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that that charge is punishable by more than 10 years?
Correct.
But I object. He's asking her to reach a legal conclusion.
I mean, it's an element of the offense, Your Honor. I have to
Right.
get it out there
Is there
somewhere.
stipulation that the underlying offense is more than 10 years?
Possibly, we could maybe. Yeah.
Or overall?
You also heard some testimony about this concept of a seizure has come up throughout the trial. Is that correct?
Correct.
When was the first time that phrase got injected into this case, seizure?
At the exam in August of 2023 from Vertez Gonzalez, Zion's boyfriend.
Okay, and at the exam, did he did he testify consistent with his description at this particular trial?
Yes,
And that was that he saw Zion essentially pass out for a couple of seconds?
correct.
Okay. And are you aware of any evidence throughout this case of the defendant claiming that Zion had a seizure?
No,
You've got sort of the defendant's browsing history from multiple sources, is that correct?
correct.
That would include Google records,
Yes,
that would include phone dumps from back in January 2022 and also from June of 2023.
correct.
Have you had an opportunity to familiarize yourself with some of that browsing activity?
Yes,
Are you aware of any browsing activity suggesting that he searched the internet or visited web pages inquiring about why a young woman might die suddenly?
no,
In terms of Dr. Glavity's testimony yesterday, there was a reference to her having summaries of 4 statements. Recall
Correct.
that? What did you send Dr. Glavity for her sort of review in connection with this case?
So in order to avoid any type of confusion, I did a summary of the video, which included audio of the first interview in January of 2022. The written statement that was signed in also the same day in January of 2022. And the interview with Lieutenant Lalone, which was the following day, and then a recap summary of the interview that happened with Sergeant Sullivan in June of 2023.
Okay, and did you also send her some medical records?
I did.
And was there ever a second set of medical records that was obtained in this case, or did you just have one set?
No, just the one,
Okay, and how did you obtain those records?
through search warrant.
Okay, and who was that search warrant directed to?
Henry Ford Health System.
Okay. In connection with those records, and I just want to publish briefly Exhibit 56, and looking at page 2, where it says that the date of birth. Whose date of birth is that?
Zion,
And what's the date of birth?
November 20th, 2004.
And as far as you're aware from the investigation, is that date of birth accurate?
Correct.
And throughout the investigation, do you have records to booking information and other sources of information about the defendant's date of birth?
Yes.
And what is his date of birth?
8/10/98.
Okay, and so what's the age gap there?
About 6 years.
Okay. There was earlier today some discussion about Exhibit 62. Do you see the top file here, the phone number
Yes.
that's reflected there? And you heard Corporal Solberg indicate there was somebody named Angela Milton associated with that number.
Correct.
Throughout the course of the investigation, have you had any sort of contact with an Angela Milton?
I have.
And who is Angela Milton?
The defendant's mother.
Okay. At various points in time throughout this case, has there been media attention?
A lot.
Was there media attention back in January of 2022?
Yes.
Was there media attention back in connection with the landfill search that was
Yes.
going on? Again, remind me, when did the landfill search conclude?
October of 2023.
Okay, and was that something that was publicly reported?
Yes.
I want to take you to what's been admitted as Exhibit 83, and specifically a call ending 947.
For a collect call, press 0. Thank you for using GTS.
Being major, still waiting, but
And I'm going to skip ahead to 6 minutes and 55 seconds.
Hey, yeah, still waiting, but so I'm just making. Are you okay? First off.
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, is it anything major?
No.
What? Hello?
Huh?
Yeah, is it anything like the one major thing it could be? Is it major? Okay.
I want to ask you, in early October of 2022, was there one major thing that could have happened at that time that could have impacted the investigation?
This calls for speculation on what my client could have been talking about, Your Honor. He's asking her to speculate.
I'm not asking her to speculate what his client was talking about. I think that speaks for itself. I'm asking her the simple question of what was the major thing going on in the investigation in October 2022.
Okay, overruled.
Was there one major thing in October 2022 that could have impacted the investigation?
Yes.
And what was that?
The landfill search was coming to an end.
Okay. And so had Zion's body been discovered, would that have impacted the investigation?
No, it had not been discovered, and yes, that would have made a big impact on the investigation.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning.
Now, you indicated that you became the OIC approximately around the 18th of January?
I believe so.
Okay. So you didn't participate in the initial search of the house?
No.
Okay. But you were aware of some of the things that were of interest that were to be sought out, correct?
The search warrant was on the 17th.
Okay. You were aware of some of the items that your department was seeking, correct?
I don't believe we were involved yet.
Okay. So Detroit Police was not involved in the investigation when the search warrant was executed?
I don't believe that DPD was handling the case at that particular moment.
Okay. You did hear testimony from Detective Sergeant Jones, correct?
Correct.
Who indicated that at that particular time she was involved in the execution of the search warrant in the search of that particular house, correct?
I don't believe on the 17th. I think that was later.
Okay. But you did hear her testify to that, correct?
That she was involved in the search warrant?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe she indicated that you were involved in the investigation at least around that particular time?
Yeah. Around that time, correct.
Okay.
And you were aware that Mr. Brazier stated that there was a jar of marijuana under the table, correct?
Yes, I remember that.
Okay. Do you know if that was ever found?
No.
Okay, that was never located?
No.
Okay.
If I could have the HDMI board stretch this far. And I am publishing exhibit number 23. You are familiar with the photographs that were taken from the house on Greenfield that belongs to Mr. Brazier, correct?
Correct.
And you would state that these particular photos, in fact, come from that particular search, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And this appears to be a table, correct?
Yes.
The living room table. And you see an orange jar to the right of that Nintendo?
I see something with an orange color with white label.
With the orange, okay. And Mr. Brazier, in fact, indicated that he had an orange jar of marijuana under the table, correct?
Correct.
And you would agree that this particular item is consistent with what Mr. Brazier said that he had under the table that contained marijuana, correct?
Looking at this picture, I can't tell what that is. I wasn't at the search warrant, so
Okay.
I can't.
And Judge, I'm just going to object because this search was days before he made that statement, so I think this question isn't appropriate.
Did you, I believe it's very important, appropriate. If I can follow up.
I think if,
Okay. And you were able to view these photographs, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this photographs came from the search, correct?
The initial search
From the initial search.
on the 17th.
Did you ever realize or notice this particular item on the table?
I did not.
You did not? Okay. So of course you didn't send anybody else to go back to the house and say, hey, this may be this particular item that was mentioned by Mr. Brazier, right? You didn't
Well,
do that?
there was a secondary search warrant done on the house, and I believe that's what you're referring to, where Sergeant Jones was at that search warrant.
Okay. And at any time, did you instruct Sergeant Jones or any other individuals working with law enforcement to look for this particular item that's depicted in this particular photograph?
No.
You did not? Okay.
After this point of the search warrant, because there was so much media attention, there's news media footage of several people going in and out of this house
Okay.
after that search warrant.
Okay, but wouldn't it be pertinent to, I guess, quarantine the particular house, or at the very least, gather all the evidence that could be of value prior to letting anybody inside the house? That would be pertinent, correct?
Well, I wasn't at that secondary search warrant, and after his statements and the secondary search warrant was done, if that was still there, it would have been collected.
You say if it was this, but you don't know whether or not it was there.
I wasn't there.
Okay, because you don't know if you didn't know it was there in the first place, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you had an opportunity to review some footage from the dumpster that was located off of Woodward, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm publishing what is admitted as, I believe, exhibit number 46. And I am starting at approximately 35 minutes and 4 seconds, which is January 6, 2022, Thursday at 14:54. And you had an opportunity to view this video, correct?
Correct, but the
Okay.
timestamp is,
Okay. Excuse me?
I believe Sergeant Ford testified that the timestamp was a different time.
It was a different time, correct?
Correct.
But he did indicate, if we can watch the video right here, if you're looking at the video, he did indicate that this particular, I guess, footage, in your opinion, is Mr. Brazier allegedly coming back to the scene. Would that be fair?
No, sir, I never said that.
Okay. So
You say the vehicle?
yes.
The vehicle is not consistent with his car.
Okay. So at this time, this is not consistent with Mr. Brazier returning to the scene, correct?
His phone put him there at that particular time.
Okay. So at no point in time did you indicate or felt that this particular footage depicted Mr. Brazier coming back to the scene, correct?
Besides two pieces of evidence where someone approaches a dumpster in the same area where he said that he put her body, and then his phone also putting him
Okay.
at that
So
location.
just to be clear, you're saying that no video footage would show Mr. Brazier's car from your observation returning to the scene, correct?
Can you state that again?
From your observation, there's no video footage that you personally saw that would indicate Mr. Brazier returning to the scene the day after, on the 6th, correct?
Besides this video?
Any video. Are you saying that this video depicts it? Yes or no? I'm trying to be clear.
Well, the timestamp of a vehicle and someone approaching a dumpster in connection with his phone putting him at the same exact location.
Okay, we'll forward a little bit. If you could watch the video. Now, Detective, you would agree that this video, this portion of the video was shown to Sergeant Ford, and then he was also shown the phone records that suggested that Mr. Brazier returned in the general vicinity of this area, correct?
I believe that that's what he said.
Okay. And you would agree that this was the vehicle that was shown to, I guess, suggest that this was Mr. Brazier, correct? You remember that, correct?
That it could be him.
That it could be him,
Yeah.
correct? Okay. And you've spoken to Sergeant Ford prior to him testifying, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you've spoken to Mr. Elsey prior to him asking those questions about Sergeant Ford about this particular vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And after all those conversations, this particular video was shown to the jury in an attempt to suggest that this was Mr. Brazier's car, correct?
I don't believe that was indicated.
Okay, but this particular vehicle was shown, correct?
The video was shown.
The video of this particular vehicle was shown to Sergeant Ford, correct?
Yes.
Okay. This particular segment of the clip, correct?
Correct.
Okay. There was not another segment of this video that was shown depicting January the 6th, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you had an opportunity to review this particular video, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you feel it could be Jaylin Brazier's car?
From what I remember from the description of his car and seeing photos, evidence photos, he had dark rims, and that's not consistent with that.
Okay, I would agree to that, but nevertheless, after those conversations that you had with Sergeant Ford and the prosecution, this particular video was shown to the jury suggesting that this could be Jaylin Brazier's car.
I think the suggestion was that a vehicle showed up at the same time. He could have been in the passenger seat, he could have been in the back seat, he could have just drove by.
Oh, okay. That was an ask of Sergeant Ford, though, correct? You would agree to that, right?
Well, it is possible at the same exact time his phone puts him there that a vehicle shows up at the dump site
Okay.
exactly around the same time.
Okay. Now, you stated that you, I guess, took part in the search of this particular vehicle, correct? Of Jaylin Brazier's vehicle, of the trunk area.
I did not.
Okay, but you had some input in as far as what was collected and what was sent off to the Michigan State Police for further analysis, correct?
So like I said before, it's a team effort, so there's several factors. So like the dog indicating on the trunk.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. I understand that. I'm as far as sending the evidence off to the Michigan State Police for further analysis, you took part in that, yes?
Correct.
Okay. And you also had a voice in what particular items were analyzed. For instance, if a particular item was used with luminol to detect the presence of a bodily fluid, correct?
So you start with your best evidence first, which was the trunk liner.
Okay. You took part in deciding which particular items were tested with luminol, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Luminol, as far as the liner, so I don't do anything with the technical part.
Okay, fair enough. You had a voice in deciding which particular items were actually tested with luminol, whether they were or were they not, correct?
I don't determine. I let a forensic scientist. I tell the story of what happened,
Okay.
what we're asking for.
Okay, but you could give a suggestion and say, hey, let's test this, or let's not test that. You have that authority, correct?
I could give suggestions on a lot of things, but I'm not an expert as
That's
forensic
not
science.
Detective, it's a simple question. You have the authority to give a suggestion, correct?
I can fill out a form and put my story and say, this is what the evidence, this is the evidence that we got.
Okay. So, yes or no? Can you tell whatever forensic tech is on the particular scene and say, hey, I think we should test this particular cloth, this particular hat, or whatever it is found in the trunk? You have that authority, correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
list the evidence.
Okay, thank you. And you were aware that there were multiple items that were found in this particular trunk, correct? As far as
Correct.
clothing and everything, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you knew that these particular items were not laid out on the ground and individually tested with luminol and or alternative light source. You knew that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You could have suggested that each particular item was removed from the trunk and tested with luminol and an alternative light source. You had the authority to do that, correct? To make the suggestion, correct?
Again, it's a team effort, so I have to rely on experts, is the FBI, a canine. I have other people, because I'm not an expert in every field.
Detective, you had the authority to give a suggestion that this particular, every item is removed from the trunk and tested with luminol and or an alternative light source, correct?
I guess you could say I could do that. I could
You
make
get-
a suggestion.
Okay, are you sure?
I have to I have to fill out a form with
Okay.
evidence, and I give to a forensic scientist and tell the story of what we recovered.
Okay. You were the officer in charge at the time this trunk was searched, correct?
I have to remember the date of the day the trunk was searched.
Okay.
Possibly, I think it was the 20th, the 19th.
And you said you became the officer in charge on the 18th, correct?
Correct, yes.
So it'd be fair that you were the officer in charge when this trunk was searched, correct?
Yes.
And as the officer in charge, you're in charge, correct?
Yes.
And the FBI were there in a supportive capacity, correct?
Correct.
They weren't calling the shots and telling you what to do on how to run your investigation, correct?
Correct.
It was the other way around. You were telling them how you wanted the investigation ran, correct?
Well, just as much as I can suggest things, they can suggest things to me.
Okay, so you can suggest things, correct? Just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't suggest that these particular items be individually searched for luminol,
No.
correct? Okay. Is there a particular reason why you didn't?
Again, we rely on a team of what people are going to give information
Okay.
that is the most valuable to generate evidence.
And in the team setting, in most team settings, there's a coach or somebody who's in authority of the other team members, correct?
Yes.
And in this particular situation, you were that authority, correct?
Yes.
You were that coach, correct?
Yes.
And they were looking to you for leadership as what's the next step on how they should do certain things, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you were present at the preliminary examination, correct?
Correct.
And you heard testimony from Vertez that he witnessed Zion have a seizure in front of his face before, correct?
Yes.
And he also testified that he had known that she had previous seizures, correct?
Correct.
You heard that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At no point in time did you ever ask the doctor, the medical examiner, to, I guess, give a different opinion incorporating that particular information, did you?
I did not.
Okay. You never went to the hospital or tried to find if, in fact, she was on seizure medication, did you?
Go to the hospital?
Oh, yes. Or
As far
check her
as-
medical records or anything.
That's what I did when I obtained a search warrant.
Oh, so you checked the medical records?
I reviewed the medical records
reviewed them?
along with the,
Okay. Okay. So if you reviewed their medical records, you heard at the preliminary examination, the doctor indicated that she did not know Zion was taking antidepressants. You remember that, correct?
yes,
Never did you correct her and pull her to the side and say, hey, I have additional information that you don't know, that I know that Zion was taking antidepressants. You never did that, did you?
no,
Okay. Nor did you ask her to formulate a different opinion, including that particular information that she was on medication for antidepressants.
I did not.
Did you personally know that she was on antidepressants after your reviewing of the medical records?
After reviewing,
Yes.
yes,
Okay. And when did you come to that knowledge that she was taking antidepressants? Approximately.
after the return came back from the search warrant.
Okay, so prior to the testimony of the doctor at the exam, correct?
You said prior?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And as part of the officer in charge, is
as far as law enforcement, is to be, I guess, as transparent as possible in revealing all the facts, correct?
Yes.
But despite that, a doctor didn't have crucial information. You sat there and listened to her say she did not know it and never.
Objection to the word crucial. I'm trying to understand how Zion Foster being on the lowest dosage possible of a harmless antidepressant is a crucial part of this case. Or how this is relevant at all, frankly.
I believe it's very relevant.
Overruled.
Okay. So, despite the doctor testifying to having no knowledge of her taking antidepressants, you sat there in silence, never bringing it to her attention up until now that, in fact, Zion was under or taking antidepressants, correct?
I provided her with the medical records. Her opinion is going to be off what is in the medical records.
Okay. And you indicated that you reviewed the medical records upon receipt of the return, which predated the exam, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And upon that review of those records, you came to the knowledge that Zion was taking antidepressants, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you were present at the preliminary examination, correct?
Correct.
And you heard her state on the record, under oath, that she reviewed the records and she did not realize or know that Zion was on antidepressants, correct?
Now, by you saying that's what she testified to, and if it's in a transcript, yes.
You were there though, right?
I was at the exam.
And you were present and you were listening attentively, correct? To the testimony, correct?
As much as best I can.
Okay. And you stated you remember her saying at the exam, correct?
That she didn't recall her taking medication. I remember, I don't think seizures came up. I just remember medication.
Okay.
If it was Prozac itself,
But you do remember her saying that she did not know that Zion was taking antidepressants, correct?
if I previously stated that I didn't know she was taking antidepressants, was my understanding that she wasn't taking medication, like pills in general.
But you just stated that you reviewed the medical records, and in those medical records, it listed that, in fact, Zion was prescribed medication for antidepressants, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you knew that at the time of the exam, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you never corrected or pulled her to the side, gave her an email, made a phone call.
Judge, objection asked and answered.
Yeah, we go.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. I'll move on. Now, you spoke to Zion's friend Alima, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that multiple times Alima and Zion would go over and smoke marijuana with Mr. Brazier, right?
I don't recall multiple times.
You don't recall her telling you multiple times that she personally went over there?
Judge, objection to hearsay. How is this at all appropriate for him to ask questions about what another person said out of court?
It's her understanding. I'm not using for the truth of the matter, just her understanding after doing an investigation.
It's just stated.
Okay. Did you ever follow up with Vertez about the frequency of Zion's seizures?
I did.
Did you? Okay. Did you conduce that to writing? Did you do an interview?
I did an interview, but nothing was recorded or taken.
Oh, so you did an interview that was nothing that was recorded or written down about whether or not Zion had a history of seizures?
It was in the presence of his attorney as well.
Okay. And you heard testimony from the preliminary examination and from trial, but we'll go back to the exam, where the doctor indicated that a seizure could be a possible cause of death, sudden death. You heard that, correct?
I believe her answer was it's possible.
Okay, so you heard at the exam that a medical doctor said it's possible that somebody could die from a seizure, correct?
Yes.
And you're stating that after hearing that testimony, you then followed up and interviewed Vertez, the person who indicated he saw these seizures, and you didn't reduce his conversation to writing, nor did you video or audio tape it?
No.
You didn't think that was of importance, that key issue?
It was in the presence of his own attorney.
Okay. But in this particular trial, for the fact finders in this trial,
don't you think that would have been important for maybe the jury to hear whether or not?
Objection. I mean, the idea that we can just play interview videos, he knows better than to try to raise this issue. This is ridiculous.
Sustained.
If you would have had the interview, you would have had to turn it over to defense counsel, correct?
Correct.
And defense counsel would have had this interview, which he could have questioned Mr. Gonzalez about it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We had an opportunity to direct.
If there was a particular video or interview that was not disclosed to defense counsel, you would agree that defense counsel wouldn't be knowledgeable about this particular interview in order to even question Vertez about it. You would agree with that, correct?
Sure.
Do you remember approximately when this interview was?
I interviewed him before the exam to get a better understanding of how her allegations. So an investigation is always continuing. So anytime something comes up, we get information, we have to follow up on it. So I can't recall, I'd have to look in my notes when I did interview Mr. Gonzalez at his home, which it was recorded. I believe you have that in evidence, to get a better understanding. And then when we found out at the exam about her possibly having a seizure or nodding out or however he described it, it was sometime after the exam. I don't recall when.
You don't recall, okay. Now, you heard testimony from the Michigan State Police body fluid identification individual.
Remind me of
his name, I'm sorry. Hafner.
Yes.
Thank you. And you heard him indicate that at some point in time he came into receipt. Let me back up. Was it your decision as to what goes to the forensics center? I mean, to the Michigan State Police for forensics?
Yes, we compile a list and send the list to the lab. Now, whether they take everything all at once, that's determined by them.
And you heard him testify that he would have liked to process all the other items that were in that trunk, correct?
I don't recall him if he said that.
You were sitting here though, correct, during the trial?
I just don't remember that part.
You don't remember that?
No.
Okay. Are you doubting he said that?
If
Okay. But nevertheless, you didn't send the other items that were in this particular trunk to him to analyze, correct?
correct.
Okay. Now, you stated that, I guess, a point person was a Michigan State Police trooper, because you stated that they're more familiar with this particular process?
Correct.
Are you familiar with the process?
Of submitting evidence to the lab?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And that's part of your duties as an officer in charge is to, after the evidence is collected, to decide which items are then sent for processing, correct?
Again, it's a team effort. We can bring the evidence compiled in a list to the state police. Now, they might decide this is the best evidence we're going to go with first and then continue on after.
Okay. Re-ask my question. You are involved in making the decision as the officer in charge of what goes to the Michigan State Police for processing, yes?
Correct.
And
Mr. Brown, hold on for a minute. I need to stop off the bench to take care of something unrelated to this matter.
okay,
Take about a 5-minute break,
that's fine.
right?
Recording stopped.
Welcome back to Live Now Detroit. You've been listening in on day 7 of the murder trial of Jaylin Brazier for the disappearance of Zion Foster, who disappeared in January of 2022. We just finished hearing from Catherine Gilliman, who's a DPD detective in the homicide unit. She was the officer in charge in the disappearance of Zion Foster. She testified that they explored the possibility of Zion still being alive. With that, they contacted hospitals. They also contacted some morgues, and they also searched international travel records. She was able to obtain some records from Instagram and TikTok. She testified about that today, and we saw some of those images in court as well. In December 14th of 2021, we saw some pictures of Zion and her boyfriend at the time, Vertez, and Detective Gilliman testified that the activity on Zion's Instagram account after she went missing was from her boyfriend. So on January 4th, or after January 4th rather, there seemed to be no activity from her account, but when that activity did start back up, after some investigation, it was determined that that was indeed Vertez. But the activity specifically from Zion, she testified, stopped around January 4th, 2022. There was also some bank activity that they looked into after that date, but that was determined to be from Zion's mother, who was making a deposit. Now, Detective Gilliman also testified on searches from January 7th. Those Google searches, once again, we saw pop up in court today. One asking, how do the police track your phone? Another asking, how do police track missing people's phones? And another, can police take a phone without a search warrant? And there were many other searches shown in court today. But Detective Gilliman did point out that she did not see any searches from Jaylin inquiring why a young woman might die suddenly. So all of the searches that he's made, that we've heard in court during this trial, asking, can one die from Motrin, asking about the force of a trash compactor. We've heard a lot of those Google searches throughout this trial, but we have yet to hear anything about him asking why someone might die suddenly, which is pretty much what he claimed happened to Zion Foster the night of January 4th after the two were smoking marijuana. Now, she also reviewed some extractions from a phone that was collected during Jaylin's arrest. She testified about seeing porn videos on that device. They had actors in them playing out a rape scene. There were multiple videos with that. One of the scenarios was with a stepbrother and stepsister. And we also heard about some comic book documents that she found when extracting this particular phone. And in that, she said that they discovered pretty much some of the same related to those videos we saw. It was relating to rape in these comic books. That was the theme of the comic book. That is what she testified in court today. So we are seeing and hearing more of what was found on the phones that were taken in during that arrest of Jaylin Brazier. Now, we did hear a phone call from Jaylin to his girlfriend at the time, asking if there was anything new, anything major. She seemed to not understand or hear him, so he reiterated that question, and he specifically asked, the one major thing, did they find that? Did that come up? So they were trying to figure out, kind of talk about what that could be. Detective Gilliman testified that at that time that he made that phone call to his ex-girlfriend, Katrina, the landfill search was happening. It was actually coming to an end. And she said that Zion's body had, of course, not been discovered. But had that have been the case, it would have made a major impact there. So some concerning comments made during that phone call. Again, these questions were all being asked around the time that landfill was being searched for Zion's body. Jaylin asking his girlfriend at the time, Katrina, if anything major was found, if the one major thing that could be found was found. Didn't specifically say what that would be. Again, court is taking a quick 5 to 10 minute break. We also saw some cross-examination between the defense attorney and Detective Gilliman there, some very lengthy cross-examination. But but it looks like court is starting back up right now. We're going to take you there.
I believe it was 2 portions like this of surrounding the trunk liner. It was either dismantled or cut in half because it was quite large.
Okay. And you said you believe. Are you sure? Are you guessing?
I did not recover the liner. At some point, it was on paper laid out, and it was like portions.
Okay. And you had to give the authorization in order to for that to be processed, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And did you at least review or observe the lining before you gave authorization to have it sent? Just to familiarize yourself with what it is and where it came from?
Yes, there were sections. There was brown paper with the sections of the liner.
Okay. And you heard the testimony from Hafner, I don't want to mispronounce his name, who indicated that at some point in time, his office came into receipt of a particular device that could magnify its view when searching on particular surfaces?
Correct.
Okay. Were you aware of that?
No.
Okay. Were you aware that such device existed ever?
No.
Okay. It never came across your mind to, like I asked the question to ask him, hey, do you have a magnifying device where you can maybe get a closer view of whatever particular surface you're trying to look at?
No. I believe that they use the tools that they have.
Okay. Did you ever ask or familiarize yourself on what tools they had?
I did not.
Okay. But knowing which tools they had, that could be helpful in determining on how thorough of an analysis they will be able to provide.
I am not a forensic scientist. I have no idea what type of tools they use, what's beneficial and what's not.
Okay, I understand, but if you familiarize yourself with which tools and how they're used, that could help you in further investigations when you're calculating on what particular items that may be sent, correct?
You could say that.
Okay. Because if you know the limitations of their analysis, that could determine on whether or not you send a piece of evidence or not, because they will be able to analyze it and possibly give you a conclusion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Going forward, we think that might be something you might want to familiarize yourself with as far as their tools that they have in order to conduct an analysis?
I could.
You said you could?
I could.
Would you?
Going forward?
Going forward, yes.
Objection to relevance.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, you were familiar with the cell phone extractions, correct, and some of the web history, correct?
Familiar? I'm familiar with the reports.
The reports, I'm sorry. And would it be a fair statement that on one of Mr. Brazier's devices that there were roughly around 1,154, I guess, porn searches, different porn searches, correct?
On one particular device, yes.
Okay. And would it be fair to say out of that 1,154, there were, as far as you know, there were only 27 that stemmed around, I guess, cousin?
That's what Detective Franti testified to.
Okay. And there were also other web searches that were done on this particular phone, correct?
As far as the report, yes.
Okay. And you heard there was testimony that there was a WebMD website that was viewed, correct?
I believe you put that up on.
Okay. And you don't know whether or not Mr. Brazier checked WebMD for why a person could suddenly die, correct?
I did not see any particular searches like that.
Okay. But did you even inquire further as to what was visited on those WebMD pages?
That particular page, no.
Were you able to get Ms. Foster's Facebook records if she had any?
I don't recall any Facebook records. We would just ask the family, you know, what social media is available.
Okay. Did you ever ask, you don't have to give the answer, but did you ever ask her friend Alima if Zion had seizures, if she witnessed Zion having seizures?
When I spoke to Alima, I asked her if she had any suicidal thoughts, if she had any medical history issues, not so much history, but any issues, and the description that I got was no. She was in a good mood. She was.
Okay. Did you follow up with Vertez about his statement that he made at the preliminary examination that she threatened to kill herself?
Say it again.
Did you ever follow up with Vertez about the statement he made at the preliminary examination that Zion had threatened to kill herself?
I believe that was in the interview that was conducted at his home.
Okay, the interview that wasn't recorded?
No, that one was recorded. That's on body camera. I asked about any, there was, again, anytime in investigation, especially at this magnitude, things keep coming up, so you have to follow up and do more investigations. There was tips or anything will come in, and there was something about her taking pills and taking pills to kill herself. I remember taking pills, majority of that. So that was recorded on body cam, and he said no, there wasn't anything, she was taking any pills, she wasn't trying to kill herself.
Okay. And this was before the preliminary examination, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And after he testified at the exam that, in fact, she did threaten to kill herself, did you follow up with an interview with Vertez about that particular subject area?
I don't recall that.
You don't recall, okay. But you do remember him saying that at the exam, correct?
There's a lot of testimony. I can't remember word for word what every single witness says.
Okay, but not word for word. That particular area of somebody trying to kill himself, don't you think that would be a pertinent line of questioning or subject area to, I guess, pay attention to?
Well, recovered from phone extraction reports and such, there was language of saying it in jest, like, I could kill myself, my nails didn't turn out right.
Detective, I'm asking you a very specific question about what you or may not have witnessed at an exam. You were present at the exam, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there was testimony that was elicited. Vertez testified at the exam that she threatened to kill herself. So are you stating that you did not hear that?
I'm not saying I didn't hear, I don't remember word for word what he said.
Okay, but you do remember that particular subject area being discussed, correct?
I honestly don't.
Okay. Do you think that in, I guess, a potential homicide case, if there's ever conversation about somebody threatening to kill themselves, do you think that's important, yes or no?
I would say so.
Okay, thank you. Now, exhibit, I believe it was 72. I think it was 72 and 70. I think it was 72, if I'm not mistaken. The Ebony Banks video
Yes.
that you stated that you watched. You stated that these were actors, correct?
I believe that they were actors.
You believe they're actors, okay. So this wasn't any type of illegal snuff film or anything of that later?
I didn't believe so.
Okay. And the second video, you stated that it was a rape style type of video. And I guess the title somewhat was like DP or something like that?
It would have to be on, I don't recall the file name.
Okay. Now the second video, was there any weapons involved in this?
I don't recall any weapons.
Okay. And you said it was a rape style. Now, how was this a rape style? You stated that it was
I guess, a stepmother of some sort and 2 stepbrothers, if I'm not mistaken?
In the second video with the white female and 2 white males, she was attempting to leave the bedroom several times. They were holding, refusing to let her leave. They were holding her down, holding her hands down.
Okay. And
She repeatedly said no.
Okay, and it'd be fair to say that at some point in all these videos, it was obviously consensual sex because it was acting, correct? You would agree to that, right?
It appeared to be portraying that.
Okay. Did you do any research on maybe the producer of this
I did
particular
not.
video? Okay. The actual title of this video?
Just what was on there.
Okay.
There was no title or ending credits or anything like that. It was just like,
Okay. Were you able to identify any of the actors or actresses who were
no, I did
partaking
not.
in this? Okay. Now, as far as the comics, you would agree that through your observation of the extraction reports, there are numerous, I guess, visits to porn comics or something of that nature, correct?
I did observe some.
Okay, and and it would be a lot. I mean, it's more than
I didn't
2.
calculate.
Okay, but it would be more than 10 or 15 or 20. correct?
I didn't calculate. I just referenced these. I saw others, but I don't know a number.
Okay. And some of those were included in the 1,154 different web history that was depicted in the extraction report, correct?
In the report itself contained.
Okay, so you yourself wasn't concerned as far as, I guess, trying to get a total of how many different porn sites or porn topics that could have been visited?
I didn't calculate anything like that.
Okay, and nor did you have Detective Markle or any other individual try to basically section off and do an itemization of the total amount of porn websites that were visited, correct?
No.
Okay. So you definitely would agree that 27 is a very small fraction of 1,154, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you would also agree that this, I guess, cousin or websites, these were searched well after Zion's disappearance, correct?
I don't recall the specific dates. I would need to reference the report.
Okay. Okay. I can just
Your Honor, may I approach? I'll approach.
Sure.
You want to hold this?
Yeah. Now, Detective, you would agree that these visits to the sites were in June of 2023, correct? Or roughly around that time period?
So there is June, but then there's also some that don't generate a date.
Okay, would it be fair, the dates that you can, I guess, see?
There's
those-
only 6 that generate a report. I'm sorry, a date. That's 6/4. This is all of 2023. It appears that it's all June 4th. There's only 7 that generate a date.
Okay, Your Honor, may I approach?
Sure.
Okay. So just to be clear, the dates that you can see, they were all generated from the same date, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and this was June 4th of 2023, correct?
Correct.
And this would have been after Ms. Foster was disappeared, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and just for the record, that happened January 4th, 5th of 2023?
Yes.
So this would be over a year and close to a year and a half after that fact,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Do you know when Mr. Brazier was arrested for this incident?
I believe it was June 13th, 2023.
Okay, so him looking at this porn would have been after him being in the Michigan Department of Corrections, correct? That date would have been after he got out, correct? From your investigation, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes,
So
he was
him-
released in January.
Okay, so him looking at this porn would have been after him being released, correct?
Correct.
And he made his statements, his first statement on January 18th, right?
Of 2022.
2022. His second
Well,
statement.
no, I believe it was
19.
19.
I'm sorry. But he attempted. You did hear testimony that he had a lawyer and he attempted to contact different prosecutors. You heard that, correct?
Yes.
And he attempted to call Detective Reinhold from the Eastpointe Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And eventually he was able to come in and make a statement, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just to be clear, when he came in, it's your understanding that he didn't have a warrant or anything for his arrest, correct?
At that time, no.
Okay. And then he made another statement, voluntary statement, on January the 20th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then he made his final statement in June of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
23. I'm sorry, 22.
22,
Correct.
yes.
Sorry.
Yes. But he wasn't arrested until almost a year and a half after his first statement, and roughly around a year from his last statement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were the officer in charge at a particular time?
Yes.
Okay. And this is after you had conducted a search warrant on his house, correct?
I did not conduct a search warrant on his house.
I'm sorry. A search warrant had been conducted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And his phones were seized, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And his car was searched, correct?
Are you referring to 2022 or 2023?
2022.
Okay.
June of 2022. These items have been seized already. Like his car was already seized by June, correct?
I'm confused at what arrest you were speaking of.
I'm speaking of the arrest where he was eventually charged in 2023.
Yes, correct.
But I'm going back until his last statement in June of 2022. At that particular time, June of 2022, a year before he was eventually arrested,
Correct.
at that point in time, a search had already been conducted on his house, correct? By June of 2022. Because you did indicate
Of his previous address.
yeah, of his previous address, the address that you suspected Zion was present at, correct?
Correct.
That had already been conducted by June of 2022, correct?
Yes.
Okay. His automobile had already been seized by June of 2022, correct?
Yes.
His phones had already been seized.
Yes.
Okay. You had a DNA swab on him at that particular time.
Yes.
Okay. Was it your decision to go forward with the arrest in June of 2023?
Was it my decision?
Yes.
Several entities, I shouldn't say entities, my department, as well as the prosecutor, we had
Okay.
numerous meetings about this case.
Okay. And it starts with the police. I mean, for the most part, right? The police request a warrant. They go to the prosecutor and say, hey, we want this particular person charged for this crime and this crime, correct?
Yes.
That's how the process starts, correct?
Yes.
And you're the individual who requested that warrant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you requested a warrant over a year after his first interview and about a year after his last interview, correct?
Are you talking about two separate? I'm confused in what you're saying.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm sorry. You're the individual who requested the warrant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you requested that warrant over a year past his first interview. It had been more than a year by the time you
Yes.
requested that warrant, correct?
Yes.
And approximately a year from his last interview, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just to be clear. To your knowledge, Mr. Brazier never tried to leave the state or anything like that, correct? To your knowledge.
I believe there was contact with MDOC that he was attempting to pursue a job or something out of state,
Okay,
but that
but-
was within.
Okay. If that's the case, he notified MDOC of his desire to do so, correct?
But that's what you asked me, yes.
Okay. So maybe I wasn't clear. Was there no evidence that he tried to flee the state without notifying anybody, correct?
Flee?
That you know. That you know. If
No.
you know, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, okay. Now, you heard from the doctor as far as being able to do an autopsy or on an individual who had a seizure and not being able to determine if that was the cause of death. You heard that, correct?
Yeah, I remember something.
Did you know that prior to that testimony?
No.
Okay. Now, in regards to Katrina Smith, you did indicate that there was an arrest warrant that was issued for her in order for her to come and testify, correct?
A detainer, witness detainer.
Okay, which essentially is an arrest warrant, correct?
Through the court.
Okay, so if somebody has, just to be clear, if somebody has a detainer on them, if the police contact them on the street or at their job or wherever, they would be arrested, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then they would then be brought in to the court eventually, correct? Okay. Now, you were aware that she was, I guess, nervous or scared about all the,
indicated to you that she was scared about all the publicity and her face being on the camera. You knew about that, right? She indicated that under so many words.
I remember her saying that she didn't want to be involved
Okay.
in, pretty much to the fact that she was done with this.
Okay, and that she didn't text message you something to the effect that she didn't want her face everywhere. She's tired of, you know.
Yeah, I do recall that.
Okay. Were you aware that she was being threatened?
Not that she indicated recently for,
Well, not recently. At any time during this investigation, were you aware that she was being threatened by outside forces?
I had heard that, yes.
Okay. And you were also aware that Jaylin's mother was being threatened or received threats from outside individuals, correct?
From her, I don't recall that. From Jaylin's mother, no, I don't recall that.
Did you speak to Jaylin's mother?
An interview was done with her with a detective from Homicide. It was done early January of 2022. I don't recall word for word if it was said in that interview. I just don't recall it.
You don't recall that?
I do
Okay.
remember hearing threats, but from Miss Milton, I can't say.
Okay. So you never personally interviewed her to ascertain whether or not she was being threatened, correct?
I did not know.
Okay. Is that something, as a detective for the Detroit Police Department, is that something you take seriously?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to, I guess, research any of these threats that were being made to Katrina Smith?
I did not.
Okay. Did she provide you any telephone numbers or any?
Not that I remember.
Not that you remember, but
No.
it's possible that she did that you just don't remember?
I don't recall her providing phone numbers that I received
Okay.
for
Or
part of threats.
or Instagram accounts or any type of social media accounts attributed to threats?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember? Okay. Now, you stated that you were listening to these jail phone calls and you heard, I guess, some type of noise from Miss Smith, I guess, disciplining the children?
I can't say if that's discipline. The young child, I know that they have young children together,
Mhm.
was gasping for air. So I would classify that as.
But they weren't gasping for air as if their air was being cut off now, was it?
It was in between a cry, so
Okay. It was
there
in
was
between.
a loud,
Okay.
what appeared to be a thump or a smack, and crying was heard and a gasp of air in
Okay.
between the cries.
Okay, would it be fair to say that sometimes when you whip a child, even on their butt, they cry? That'd be fair, right?
Sure.
Okay. And you didn't hear anything out the ordinary as far as like the baby being tossed around or thrown against a wall or anything, did you?
I didn't hear that, but I did
Okay,
hear
okay,
her.
okay, thank you. And you have no evidence other than you just heard what you classify as a smack. You don't know if that was a smack on the behind, do you?
I just heard a noise that was a smack
Okay,
or a thud.
You don't know whether or not she smacked her on the back, on the
Correct.
behind, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And all you heard was a cry, correct?
As
And-
well as her saying she hurt her foot. So I don't know what type of,
She hurt her foot. So what?
that's what she
So
stated.
you thought that she kicked the child?
I didn't, I just put what I heard in the call. I observed a call, I recorded in a report what I heard on the call.
Okay. Did you ever have a conversation with Miss Smith about her children?
No, that was handled by child abuse.
Okay. And to your knowledge, nothing came about that particular investigation, correct?
No, that I know of, no.
Okay. And you stated the reason you did that was out of abundance of concern for the children, right?
I have a duty to
Okay. You have a duty to investigate certain things?
Yes.
But you didn't investigate the threats on Katrina Smith's life, did you?
No, I did not do that investigation.
Oh. Your duty stops there, though, right? Your duty as a detective stops at investigating threats on somebody's life, correct?
I don't recall her personally saying that to me.
I thought you said you were aware of that.
I was aware of that, but her indicating to me
Okay.
and then another detective talking with her,
Oh, okay.
I can't.
As the OIC, as a detective for the Detroit Police Department, if you're aware of something, whether or not it came from somebody's mouth, isn't it your duty to investigate?
For something like that,
For a death threat, isn't that your duty to investigate? If you have information that somebody's life is being threatened, isn't it your duty to investigate?
yes.
Okay, and you failed to investigate in this particular incident when you knew there was threats on Miss Smith's life, correct?
Yes.
And you said you didn't even inquire about Jaylin's mother's about the death threats on her, right? You didn't even ask.
I don't remember that. Like I said, an interview was conducted by another detective.
Okay. But as your job as an OIC is to go through all the interviews, correct?
Correct.
To get a broad understanding of the case and the witnesses, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you go through that interview?
I did go through that.
Okay, but yet you don't remember what the interview was about, right?
Was in January of 2022 and
Okay, but you had plenty of time before January of 2022 and today's date. You had a lot of time, right?
yes.
Okay. And in that time period, you could have reviewed that interview to familiarize yourself on what was being said, correct?
Yes.
And yet you're in court right now and you don't have no idea what the interview is about, correct? That be fair?
I don't remember that part.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
If I can just redirect,
Yeah, sure.
all right, it's 12:58. We're gonna take a break for lunch, it's getting late. We'll be back at 2 o'clock. And we'll continue. All right, seated, all the members of the jury are present, and Detective Catherine Gilman.
Okay.
Sorry. Back on the stand. Go ahead, Mr. Mason.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective, I want to ask you about the photos that have been admitted as Exhibit 23. You were asked a question about this particular photo that's page 8 of Exhibit 23. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now this set of photos, help remind us, where do these photos come from?
This was evidence photos from a search warrant executed on January 17th
Okay, and
of 2022.
at the time that this search warrant was executed, was DPD Homicide involved in this investigation yet?
No.
And at the time that this search warrant was executed, had the defendant come forward with any statement to the police about, in fact, being with Zion Foster in this particular home?
No.
And in terms of the overall investigation, if you could have recovered anything of value, or anything of value could have been recovered from this particular search warrant, what would have been the most valuable thing you could have hoped to recover?
The most valuable piece of evidence would have been her body.
Okay. And I also want to show you part of what's been admitted as Exhibit 46, and specifically the video from January 6th of 2022. This time frame that's shown here, with the timestamp being 2:56 p.m. on the system time, what is the relevance of this general time surrounding that point in time?
That the defendant's phone also put him at that location at this time.
Okay, and to be clear, this particular vehicle, do you know whose vehicle that is?
No.
Okay, and can you say with any certainty whether the defendant was in that vehicle?
No.
Okay. There were some questions about the requests for certain items to be submitted to the Michigan State Police Laboratory for analysis, correct?
Yes.
Can I ask, how long has this case been pending?
This case, since the defendant's arrest in June of 2023.
Okay, and during the time that this case has been pending, are you aware of, or did you receive any requests by the defense to get any items analyzed at the laboratory?
No.
Okay. There are some questions about Vertez Gonzalez's testimony at the preliminary exam in August.
Yes.
And after that testimony, did you make any efforts to determine whether there might be any other recent records, medical records from Zion Foster in existence other than the Henry Ford records that we've already discussed at length?
There was only one record from Henry Ford.
Okay, and did you check with anyone to determine whether there could be any other recent providers that may have provided care to Zion?
Correct. Yes, Sierra Milton, her mother.
And based on your discussions with Ms. Milton, were you able to identify any other possible recent providers of medical care to Zion?
No, only Henry Ford.
There was some discussion about a follow-up meeting involving Vertez Gonzalez.
Yes.
At some point. And who was present at that particular meeting?
Myself, you, Vertez Gonzalez, and his attorney.
And what was the purpose of that particular meeting?
To clear up the statement that he made at the exam about a seizure.
Okay, and as part of, let me ask, in terms of your general experience, have you participated in other, I guess, meetings with prosecutors and witnesses before trial?
Yes.
Are those meetings typically recorded in some way?
No.
Okay. But if you're just interviewing a witness directly as part of an investigation, is that recorded usually?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of the meeting that took place with Mr. Gonzalez, was there any other information that came to light in that meeting that we haven't already heard in open court?
No.
And in terms of the discussion with Mr. Gonzalez in that meeting, other than his description that he essentially saw, that you heard him testify to in open court about essentially seeing Zion pass out for a second or two, did he have any other relevant information about seizures?
No.
Okay. There are also some questions about Alima. Who is Alima when it comes to this investigation?
Alima was one of Zion's friends.
Okay, and was she interviewed during the investigation?
Yes, she was.
Okay. Do you know how old Alima is?
Approximately the same age as Zion.
Okay. There were some questions about alleged threats to certain people. When it comes to Katrina Smith, did you personally become aware of any sort of, let's say, actionable information about her being threatened?
No.
What sort of information did you have about threats excuse me, when it came to her?
I just remember hearing that, you know, people had known about what happened from the case and were making comments on, I'm guessing social media, making comments about how they would get to her.
Okay, were you aware of any specific people?
No,
Were you aware of any specific comments?
no,
Were you aware of any specific threats that were made to her?
no,
Are you aware of whether she ever made a police report about these supposed threats?
not that I'm aware of.
If such a report had been made, what would be the process for investigating a threat? Would that be something that Homicide would do?
No,
Who would handle a report about threats of that nature if it were made in Detroit?
so each precinct has a precinct detective unit. So for crimes that are not quote-unquote major crimes, they're handled by the precinct in which either it's reported or the incident happened. So a precinct detective unit would handle that.
And again, are you aware of any type of report made by Katrina Smith relating to threats?
No,
How about for Angela Milton? Did you ever become aware of any actionable information about Angela Milton being threatened?
no,
Were you ever aware of anything specific about any supposed threats that were directed at her?
no.
What sort of information did you have, if anything, about threats when it came to her?
Like I said, I don't remember the interview exactly, specifically for Angela Milton.
Okay, and her interview, she was one of approximately how many people interviewed in connection with this case?
Countless.
Okay, and was there anything special or material gained from her interview that you know of?
No,
Okay, so she's not would you say like a material witness in this case?
no,
Again, are you aware of Angela Milton making any sort of police report about supposed threats?
no.
There was some question about the timing of when the defendant was ultimately charged with murder, and just to remind us, when was the murder charges, the charges that he's on trial for, when were those charges filed?
I believe it was June 12th, 2023.
Okay, and his last formal statement that he made up until that point was when?
I believe it was June 10th, 2022.
Okay, and so what was the reason for waiting to have him charged with homicide during that time?
So the landfill search had concluded. During the end of the landfill search, a witness had come forward that wanted to offer information. So again, the investigation continued. So between interviewing the witness, conducting other search warrants, waiting for the returns on that, that's why.
Okay, and so it sounds like there were other leads that were being chased down in that time?
Yes.
And at some point, you were part of the effort to get charges authorized, correct?
Yes.
And what's your role in that process when it comes to getting charges authorized?
I submit a final, we call it an investigator's report, and we submit it to the prosecutor's office, determine if charges are going to be issued or not.
Okay, and then charges were issued, you said, in June of 2023, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
Now, Detective, you just testified that you were aware that comments were being made to Katrina Smith on social media in the way of threats, correct?
I remember, when I say comments, I'm not sure if, and that's how I see it, as like it would be social media, because the word comment is usually a direct.
Okay, but that was your testimony that you remember some comments being made to Katrina Smith, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you never researched these comments or checked about these comments, did you?
No.
Okay. Now, as far as if a police report was generated, you wouldn't know because you never checked, correct?
I have searched Katrina Smith's name, and there was no threats report made.
When did you check her name?
Several times throughout the investigation, as well as I searched his
Okay.
name as well.
Did you check his mother's name through the search?
I don't recall.
Okay. So if there was a police report that was generated by her mother, by his mother, you wouldn't know if it exists or not, correct?
Yeah, correct. I'm not aware of a
Okay.
threats report.
Now, you stated that there was no actionable, I guess, evidence to support this. The reason why it wasn't actionable because you didn't dig deeper and do additional research to substantiate these threats, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And had you did additional research, you might have found something that was actionable, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Had you did deeper investigation, it's possible that you could have had some information that was actionable, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated that, I guess, items of, lesser importance are done at the precincts. I'm just paraphrasing. I don't want to take the words out of context, but that was the general idea that you were relaying to us, correct?
Well, if you're referring to major crimes, that was what I stated.
Okay.
Major crimes is a separate entity from the precinct. So major crimes consist of homicide, domestic violence, sex crimes, and child abuse. So it's not my definition.
Okay, but as an officer in charge, if you get some information that a potential witness' life is being threatened behind a case, is that significant to you?
Yes, it would be.
Okay. And you're familiar with the charge of witness intimidating, bribing, or tampering with?
Yes.
Okay. And that could be applicable in this case, correct? Correct? Could have been.
Comments made on the internet?
If somebody's being threatened and they're scared to come and testify, that could be witness intimidation, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And if something happened to that individual where they became missing and somebody actually acted upon these threats, that could be information you would want to know on who was previously making these threats, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Any questions from the jury? Please write your question down to pass it to the deputy. Counsel, please approach. Maybe you can step up. proceed.
Your Honor, at this time, on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan, I rest.
All right, I need to take up something outside the jury's presence. I'll have you back shortly. Please go into the jury room. We're outside the presence of the jury.
Yes, I'll do my motion when you do the board here. Your Honor, I would motion for a directed verdict. You know, the court is to see and take the evidence and most favorable in the light of the prosecution. However, I don't believe that any rational or reasonable jury would find Mr. Brazier guilty of the crime of homicide. We've heard testimony from numerous individuals, one being from Bertez Gonzalez, who indicated that he was aware that Ms. Foster had a history of seizures. He personally witnessed one of them. He indicated that she told him that she had previous seizures and that she was taking medication for those particular seizures. We then heard information from the doctor, who was a medical examiner, who did indicate from her experience and her knowledge that an individual could in fact die of a seizure with little to none showing from an individual as far as if they're observing from the outside. She also indicated that this could happen in a matter of seconds from the time of the individual walking out of the room, back into the room. So for saying all of that, without going too much more into it, Your Honor, we just asked for a directed verdict because we don't believe the prosecutor can meet their verdict on that particular charge.
Your Honor, just briefly, it's the people's position that the circumstantial evidence in this case does support a finding of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In particular, we have evidence concerning a relationship between Mr. Brazier and Ms. Foster that, by all appearances, bordered on inappropriateness given the communications that we had between the two of them. We have evidence that on January 4th, he brought her to his house late at night alone behind the back of his girlfriend. And we know that she left his house in the trunk of his car and that he ultimately put her body in a dumpster and then did everything he could to manipulate, to lie, to obstruct the investigation. And so to now say that he threw her away because of a seizure, which was never even one of the supposed explanations that he gave to the multiple inconsistent statements he gave to the police. It's not supported, but it's an argument I think that he can make to the jury. He's entitled to make it to the jury, and this is a case that needs to be ultimately in the hands of the jury.
All right, certainly we've had, we might have 32 witnesses who have testified so far. The court reviews motions for directed verdict on the light most favorable to the non-moving party, which in this case obviously is the people. Certainly there's been testimony that Mr. Brazier picked up Ms. Foster from Ms. Foster's home in Eastpointe on January 4th, brought her to his home, that they consumed marijuana, although that changed a couple of times. Evidence indicates that he believes that she first OD'd on marijuana, then on LSD, then no, it was marijuana, that he quote-unquote freaked out, and then put her body in the back of his vehicle. And there's certainly evidence on the night in question that he backed up his white Acura, presumably to disguise, not make it obvious that he's putting a body in the trunk, put a body, presumably based on the evidence, into the trunk, traveled to Highland Park, put that body in a dumpster, and then apparently made up a story, if you believe the prosecutor's version of events, that he received a scratch near the base of his throat from his cat. I think the jury could conclude that, based upon all of that evidence, that perhaps while there could be some sort of strange medical event that resulted in the death of Ms. Foster, it's also conceivable that the jury could view the evidence that there was some nefarious conduct that he in fact contributed to, if that caused Ms. Foster's death, and then attempted to cover it up. We also have the testimony of Dr. Lee Lavity, who I think disputes the theory made by the defense that this was some sort of seizure or undiagnosed medical event that resulted in Ms. Foster's death. And that evidence, if believed, I think could also convince the jury that Mr. Brazier caused Ms. Foster's death. So for those reasons, motion for directed verdict is denied. Do you intend to call any witnesses, Mr.
No.
Brown? All right, Mr. Brazier, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. If at some point you can't hear, you don't understand something I say, please interrupt and let me know. And then I'll stop and go over it again and make sure that you do hear and you do understand, okay?
Yes.
And if I ask you a question and you give me an answer, I'm going to assume that you understood the question and the answer that you gave is the answer you intended to give. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand you have the right to testify in this case and tell your version of the facts?
Yes.
And do you understand if you want to testify, and you do testify, that Mr. Elsey has the right to cross-examine you?
Yes.
You understand you also have the right not to testify in this case. You can decide not to testify in this case. I'm going to instruct the jury that they cannot hold that silence against you in reaching a verdict.
Yes.
All right, and if you had a chance to speak to your attorney, Mr. Brown, about your right to testify and your right not to testify.
Yes, sir.
And I don't want to know what you talked about, but did you speak about the risks of versus the benefits of testifying versus not testifying?
Yes.
Right, did he answer all of your questions as it relates to the decision to testify versus not testify?
Yes, he did.
All right. And is it your decision to testify or not testify in this case?
Not testify.
And is that decision based upon an adequate opportunity to speak with your attorney, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Has anyone threatened you, coerced you, or in any way forced you not to testify?
No, sir.
Has anyone promised you anything so you don't testify?
Not at all.
All right. Any other questions, Mr. Brown?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. And we're ready to proceed with closing arguments?
Yes.
Judge, I don't think that realistically I'm going to be able to finish today with his closing and rebuttal. Just given the less than an hour and a half left at this point. There were a lot of witnesses. My initial argument runs in about an hour and 5 minutes.
All right.
So I guess I'm wondering if we can just come back tomorrow and close. Or perhaps, and so we don't lose all the time, I don't know if the court would consider giving the instructions today instead of after closing arguments.
I think instructions are probably better given after closing arguments.
Understood.
So you're at about an hour. How long are you, Mr. Brown?
Nowhere near that, maybe 25 minutes, 25 minutes.
So that would put us at 4 o'clock. And then rebuttal.
10 to 15.
And I might be a little over. I'm just, it might be like a half an hour, close to half an hour possibly.
So we realistically, we might go until 4:30 if we were to get to that. I hate to waste all the time, but I also want to make sure that everybody's ready and we're doing a fair job here. All right, we'll, I guess we'll resume tomorrow.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and feel free to leave a comment. Have a blessed day.